Whatever you think of Sydney radio host Alan Jones, it's indisputable that he wields a substantial influence over Australian politics. We don't often get an insight into the man behind the microphone, what drives his many campaigns, and whether he ever admits to getting it wrong. But today Alan Jones gave a speech to the National Press Club, and afterwards he agreed to join me for a rare one-on-one interview. Alan Jones, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Leigh. My pleasure.
Of all the competing issues that are around at the moment, the one that you chose to focus on in your speech today was coal seam gas mining. Why is that currently your number one priority?
Look, I think this is the biggest issue facing Australia today, and it's the biggest land issue since native title. Kevin Rudd's made a couple of major speeches about this in relation to Australia's food security. The thing is, Kevin Rudd's a Queenslander, and our food producing capacity in Queensland has been completely compromised by open-cut coal mining and coal seam gas mining. I mean, when you think that 90% of the Darling Downs, which is one of the world's great food bowls, is under a mineral licence of some sort or another, when you think that they're going to have 20 to 30 open-cut coal mines in the next 15 years, 40,000 coal seam gas wells, I mean, no one can be serious when they talk about food security and the great opportunities for us in Asia when our prime agricultural land is being surrendered to mining.
Throughout your career, you've chosen issues that you want to campaign on, and this one is the latest. How do you decide among all of the issues that are out there, OK, this is the one I'm going to pick to run with really hard on my radio program?
Well, I always say that my listeners are my best researchers. So a lot of my issues are taken from the correspondence. I answer over 100 letters a day, and I gain information from them. So I'm not picking up the Daily Telegraph or the Herald or the Australian and saying, what's on the front page, we're going to sort of run with all this. And as a result, those people are only going to write when there's a level of urgency about what they say. I'm not about saying I must do this because it'll create a controversy and someone's going to listen and this will improve the ratings. I guess your critics say that, but that's not the way we go about it.
What about, you used to be a fan of Julia Gillard and then you've changed your mind on her. Was your judgment wrong in the first place on her then?
Well, I hate to answer your question in the negative, but I think my judgment was wrong. She was always welcome to come into the studio, and she did. There was never any invitation. She just came in. She had no notes like you and me here now. Then she became Prime Minister. I actually thought that was a good thing because I thought that Kevin Rudd was in all sorts of trouble with the electorate and was just making stuff up as he went along. And then suddenly Julia seemed to out-Rudd Rudd. And then when you had the election business about on July 23 last year saying she'll only move on carbon tax when it's the community behind it and the economy is right, and then in the last week panicking. Putting
aside your disappointment in her performance, is it appropriate that a broadcaster of your influence would say that the Prime Minister should be taken out to sea and put in a bag and left out to sea, and do statements like that undermine the dignity of the office of Prime Minister?
Well, I think you're right about the criticism about undermining the dignity of the office is very valid. On the other hand, the Prime Minister herself has done a good deal to undermine the dignity of the office by not telling the truth to the electorate. On the other hand, that was a bit of a throwaway line, meant to be a joke. People who didn't hear it wouldn't regard it as a joke. To that extent, yes, it's regrettable. It would have been better left unsaid.
Did you correct yourself or say anything to that effect on air at the time?
I didn't say anything about that, no. On the earlier occasion when I had a occasion to, which I was criticised for when she was late for an interview, which she sought to have, I didn't ask her on. She asked to come on, and she was 12 minutes late, and as with this program and any other program, 12 minutes is an eternity. You don't know whether to put another person up or whether you'll wait for her. And so when she came on, I said, look, it's 22 minutes after 7. I mean, this was a 10 past 7 job. I mean, what's going on? She said, I'm busy. And I said, well, so's everybody. And then I had a bloke out on the road who'd rung in earlier about the Prime Minister and the waste of money. And I asked her what she thought about all of that. Subsequently, when I got off air, I did think that that was a bit much, so I immediately sent an email. I had her email address. When I sent it to the email address, it didn't answer, it bounced back. So I thought, well, I had my staff ring her office. They said, no, we can't give out an email address, send it to us. Well, I wasn't going to be sending a private letter to the Prime Minister to somebody else or anybody else around, so she never got it, and I suppose those misunderstandings continued. But the chaff bag thing, yeah, most probably too clever by half.
Do you think that often you overstep the line or are too clever by half? Do you think that is a
I don't think so.
mistake you make?
Look, you're going at 100 miles an hour. You've got you're 3.5 hours of it, and I guess in all of that you're going to make mistakes and you're going to say things you regret. I think the important thing is to just recognise that and hope that you don't repeat it.
Why do you, when people come on the show who disagree with your views, why do you personally attack them or abuse them?
No, I don't attack them, I attack the issue.
But you call people things like, that fool Windsor, that idiot Wilkie, that fool Garno, this brain-dead Sarah Hanson-Young. Why does it go to that level?
Well, if you take them one by one, I think we can justify all of them.
No, but is any of that valid to...
Well, I think, what you said about Oakshott and Windsor, surely... You'd have to be brain dead, wouldn't you, to represent a Conservative electorate which voted overwhelmingly against a carbon tax and then vote in favour of a carbon tax, knowing that your political career is finished. If that's not brain dead, I don't know what it is.
They might not view it as brain dead because they might think, well, I'm standing up for what I believe.
But I think they're brain dead for behaving in that way. You'd have to be brain dead. Oakshott's got a family. He's got little kids. Where the hell is he going to get a job, this bloke? But
it's so subjective. They might say, oh, well, Alan Jones is brain dead because he doesn't believe in climate change. It's a subjective thing, isn't it?
No, but that's not the point. Robert Oakshott is representing an electorate in which 94% of them don't support a carbon tax.
But nonetheless, why does it have to be expressed in those terms? Why can't you simply express it in terms of, well, I disagree with that view and I think it's incorrect? Why does it have to come down to brain dead or idiot?
Mm-hmm. Well, because I suppose it's the Alan Jones program, and that most probably exemplifies how I feel about that.
Last month you said on your show that name-calling is the province of those who can't sustain an intellectual argument. Does that extend to people that call the Prime Minister dual liar?
Well, no, I didn't see... There you are. Thank you for... I didn't call her July.
I'm not saying that you did, but people do.
Well, I didn't. What happened was... that was first coined on my program. I asked her because she asked to come on the program to announce that she was introducing a carbon tax. You can imagine at 9:10 at night, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So she came on in the morning, and it was that stage this thing was raging. And I said, look, how do you feel about the fact that people are now calling you Julia? Well, of course, that morphs into Alan Jones calling her Julia and so on. But it is...
Is it an appropriate term?
Well, when you say there will be no carbon tax under the government I lead and you introduce a carbon tax, were you lying to the electorate? I think you were.
Sufficiently respectful to the office of Prime Minister?
Well, she should be respectful to the office of Prime Minister and not betray the faith of the electorate in such a way.
I wanted to talk about a few other issues. I don't want to get bogged down in a discussion about climate science and numbers because I'm not a climate scientist and that's a discussion for another time. But broadly, the Australian Communications Media Authority is investigating your program over whether it's been fair and accurate in its coverage of climate change issues. Do you think that they're going to find in your favour?
That's a very subjective question. How would I know what they're going to do?
Well, do you think that your approach to that issue is fair and balanced?
Leigh, what I've done about carbon tax and climate change, I've interviewed some of the leading scientists in the world. Every one of the people that I've asked, the overseas people, have responded. I have, and they, by and large, were people who said this was a hoax. These are some of the finest minds. Professor Timothy Ball, Professor Richard Lindzen, juxtaposed against a government which says the science is settled.
But do you have orthodox scientists on as frequently as you have on sceptics? And when you do have them on, do you treat them in such a friendly manner as you do the sceptics?
Well, you'll be able to test that tomorrow. I've got someone on tomorrow. But I tell you what, Leigh, getting them to the microphone's tough. I mean, I've asked Flannery and I've asked Professor Stephan. David Crowley came immediately. Julia Gillard, who's the proponent of 19 bills and 1,000 pieces of legislation which were passed last week that no one has read, 19 bills and 1,000 pieces. The seat's available to her. She's never accepted it. Greg Combe has. He's been on the program several times.
Is it tough because they think they won't get a fair go?
They get a fair go. I tell you why it's tough. They can't argue the case.
But so you mentioned Richard Lindzen and David Crowley before. When Lindzen was on, you spoke for 30% of the time and he spoke for 70%. When Crowley was on, you spoke for 60% of the time and him for only 40%.
Oh, God, this is a good ABC analysis, isn't it?
Well,
it depends on the nature of the conversation. I mean, if Crowley then stops, I've got to talk. And he stopped and I filled up the void. But he got a fair go. I don't think he thought he didn't get a fair go.
Do you ever think... What if I'm wrong on the climate change thing? What if the CSIRO and NASA and all of the others are right on that? And what if I'm wrong? Do you ever wonder about that?
Do you ever wonder why Garno, Professor Garno and Tim Flannery and David Caroli and Will Stephan and the CSIRO might argue their position. Might it have something to do with who's paying the bill? These aren't objective. Their comments are not peer-reviewed.
But do you want me to believe that there is a global conspiracy involving the CSIRO, NASA, the Bureau of Meteorology, the British government, the Chinese government, absolutely everyone, that there's this big mass conspiracy?
We'll have a look at the IPCC email leaks. I don't know about a conspiracy, but I mean, Stephen Harper, the Canadian Prime Minister, presumably not a dunce, has sacked the whole of the Department of Environment and Climate Change in Canada. Is Barack Obama running off about all of this? I mean, why? China opening a coal-fired power station every week. This is the source of our international strength. This is the source of our economic well-being.
And to hear Alan Jones quizzed further on climate change, on whether he was paid to appear at an anti-carbon tax rally in Canberra, and on when he might retire, the full half-hour version of that interview will be on our website tomorrow.